Hello, everybody. Welcome to my weekly meltdowns coverage of Big Brother 23. We are here to recap everything going on in week 3 and then moving into week 4 with the Christian HOH. And we are here to break it all down. Since Allison lost her third draft member tonight, she was a little too embarrassed to be here tonight. So apologies for that. But with us as always, Beth, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I had to miss last week because I had friends in town. So I'm excited to be back. But I obviously am missing Allison because I would love to tell her, listen. Not all of us can be good at drafts all the time, Allison. Right. It's okay. Right. It's okay. Right. Yeah. She normally wins the drafts, so it's nice for her to potentially be taking a losing seat here.
Yeah, I feel like she's saying, I sadly 2E vote.
Oh, my God. She's cooking in her mental right now. That's
yeah. And with us tonight is the amazing content creator for all things Big Brother, Survivor, and beyond. We are very honored to have with us tonight. Peridium, how are you doing?
Yes.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm good. I was enjoying this episode. I think it might be my favorite episode of the season so far.
Really?
So you guys, I think so. I think you guys got me for a good time to be on the podcast for the first time because I was enjoying it. I laughed out loud a couple times, which was, not often on Big. Usually I know what's coming up because I'm so ingrained in the feeds. So as Brent put it, I got a lot up in the mental that I'm ready to talk about.
Yes.
You're cooking it up, something in the mental.
Yeah, something up here.
Before we get into all of it, I want to say hi to everybody in the chat. So we have Kyland, two Kylands, Joseph Boza, John P, Sam Higdon, Adrian Romero, Brandon, Connor. Hello, everybody. Thank you guys for tuning in. So, Peridium, what made this episode stand out to you?
I think there was a couple things. I was trying to think about this too. What is it exactly that I liked? I think one of the main reasons is that there was no competition that sort of clogged a lot of the airtime. I think last episode, the competition went on really long and the drama wasn't really there. Yes. It was more like just to watch Brent basically fall over himself or fall over that inflatable sofa.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It was insane.
No, it was crazy. No, sorry, go ahead, Peridium.
No, and so for tonight, it was half of it was spent basically showing us just how bad Brent was doing and how it got this way, and just there was no real chance. It was an 11-0 vote, and even walking out the door, we got to watch Brent live, basically in a bit of an embarrassment and denial of didn't really know what he was talking about. He kept saying the same thing over and over again. And then it was fun. I enjoyed watching, even though the Brent interview probably went on a little bit too long, I still felt pretty satisfied by the end of the night. So
yeah, I at least was satisfied that she was kind of being I thought you were comfortable. Basically kind of went after him a little bit. And I was like, ooh, I like when Julie gets saucy.
Yeah, I agree that and I definitely think that the interview went a little too long too. So she asked him one question and then we went to commercial and I was like, okay, yeah, that's all we need to really hear from Brent. And then we get another 10-minute interview when we come back from commercial. I'm like, okay, do we really need to hear him say I was a huge threat in this game? I would have caused chaos and I have a really strong personality. And I'm like, okay, where?
I think for those who don't watch the live feeds, that interview was very on point for who Brent has been for the last 3 weeks, especially in the last week. Even in the face of an 11-0 vote with those exit goodbye messages with Tiffany burying him and Hannah burying him, he still sort of was I was just too big of a threat. Isn't that maybe a bad thing? You didn't have a good strategy? No, I was a great strategist. They just caught on to me too soon. And it kind of got repetitive. He didn't seem to understand what had happened, and I still don't think he will beyond the season, but that's okay. So
I think it'll be interesting to see what it's like when he comes back to the real world and sees either if he does choose to go back and watch the episode, see what people are saying about him and see because let's be honest, I feel like people don't really learn when they are getting quote unquote attacked online, which I feel like that's how he's going to feel. He is going to be attacked, which honestly I'm sure there will be people who will be. But for the most part, it's going to be people being like, hey, let's talk about your blatant misogyny. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about how creepy you are with women. Let's talk about these kind of different things. And I really feel like it's going to be interesting for him to be able to go back and like, it shows a real growth of a person if they can go back and listen to what somebody is saying and say, oh, you know what? I didn't realize this before. Let me make those changes. But I have a feeling, like you said, Peridium, I don't think those changes are going to come.
I don't think so either.
I don't know if we're going to even know one way or the other, or how much we're going to bother to find out if it has.
100%.
So,
yeah. We saw like basically like a montage tonight of like people trying to like extend him an olive branch and say like, listen, like maybe you should consider how you talk to people a little bit better. And all three of us are East Coast people, but I don't think that we share that same sentiment as Brent.
I did not. He's like, it's an East Coast, and I'm like, since when?
Right.
When is it an East Coast thing? I've been on the East Coast my whole life. I have never. Yeah. I mean, I'm not in Jersey. I'm in DC, the DC area, but I don't experience anything like that. So
no, I think a lot of this too. It's really interesting. I was listening to, or not listening. I was reading some of the tweets from my BB mutuals who are Italian Americans, and they were like, you know what, BB has a really bad issue with stereotyping Italian Americans and expecting people to live up to a certain like. Honestly,
like douchey, like Guido type of thing.
Yeah, like standard. That's like, I feel like the closest we got was to breaking that was BB16 Cody, not BB22 Cody.
Yeah,
I was like, wait.
It's just like very. I don't know. It's just I feel like they purposely cast someone to play this like archaic like. I don't know, like misogynistic, a little racist.
It's a little bit. They did it on BB on Big Brother too to do a throwback to Justin, and that's kind of who Brent a little bit reminded me of, but like 20 years into the future. Yeah, and I don't want to, I mean, Justin's his own story. This is a long throwback that nobody's probably going to know too much about, but like. Yeah, that whole stereotyping Jersey Shore, they're still doing it a little bit. I think Brent was a little bit of slice of that, but in the 2021 version. Yeah. But interestingly, when it comes to like Survivor, you get players like Tony Vlachos is from Jersey, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. I don't technically Natalie Anderson isn't from Jersey, but she's lived there for a while and she put that as her home state. So that's pretty. And Michelle Fitzgerald.
And Brent is from Rhode Island. And the thing about Rhode Island, he's from Rhode Island, and there is a very large Italian American. Actually, I believe it's in Cranston. I think that's where he's from. And Cranston has like one whole street where the entire street is just painted as the Italian flag colors. Yeah. It's a pretty it's a pretty Italian area, but that is where Pauly D from Jersey Shore is from. So I feel like it's like they cast from that pool. Yeah. So I don't know. It's a very.
I'd also heard that Brent was a little bit of a casting. He was left over from Robin Cass casting.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
Versus the new Jesse Tannenbaum. Yeah, right. As opposed to, I heard that both Frenchie and Brent, maybe Travis, I don't know, two of the three people evicted so far were from Robin Cass. So I don't know.
Yeah, but that just goes to show, Peridium, like the shift in like culture of the house with this new casting team, right? Like that doesn't surprise me at all. And I feel like in seasons past, like Brent would have had a better chance of like making the finale night. Unfortunately, like that's kind of like the.
I thought the same thing. And you know what's funny? On the feeds, Brent said that he was an alternate for BB20, and he thinks he got replaced by Brett, amusingly enough.
Maybe that would explain Julie Chen calling him Brent.
And I thought to myself, on another season, I could see Brent actually getting that 6-5 vote. Because I feel like we kind of saw that on BB20 a little bit with literally with Brett surviving, like probably 6-5 or whatever it was over Rachel or Winston or whatever. So yeah, I don't know. It was an interesting. I thought, oh man, in another timeline, maybe Brent would still be in the house, or maybe he was weak to HOH.
And I have to say too, I would have been more interested to see Brett play with this cast, because I feel like I don't know why. I'm not a Brett fan. I'm going to put it out there. I don't think that he was I don't think he was a good player. I don't think, like, everybody kind of gasses him up. And there's a lot of people who were like, oh, he was cute and I liked him that way. And I was like, no. He was a douche. But anyway, I think that I would love to see him play with a cast like this rather than a cast that kind of gassed him up a little bit more, because I don't think this cast would take his shit. And I think I actually do see where we could have seen like little embers of like really interesting gameplay, like strategic gameplay coming from Brett. But he kind of just like rested on his laurels in BB20. Didn't really have to do too much. And I feel like Brent would have done really well in BB20. And I think that Brett would have been challenged enough, and I would have been interested to see how he fared with such a, well-rounded cast like this one is.
Yeah, I mean, I think what people like about Brett from Big Brother 20 is like, I feel like he's the best that archetype in the Big Brother house can be. Like, you're like alpha bro, like frat boy type of thing. Like, at least he
just stop casting the archetype.
Of course, right? That is the solution. Right? But yeah, like, so like luckily for us and everything, he didn't really make it too far this season. So and that's just
it's kind of like 2022 seasons of Big Brother have been flipped on their head with this boot order.
I'm so excited by it, though. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
If you had a perfect world, who would you forget the Christian wins HOH? Like, we don't know who wins HOH. Who would you have liked to have seen go next, or would you like to see go next
for this week?
For this week, yeah.
Okay.
If you were keeping with, I like this boot order, who completes it as the fourth boot?
Yeah, I was saying on Twitch earlier today, probably Whitney, if I had to pick somebody. But I do think Whitney winning or being safe this week would have caused the most chaos, because she's, I think ultimately still, as of today, even with Christian, Whitney is still in the most trouble. And I could see her most likely if like there's like a percentage of every player getting evicted this week. I still think she's got the most likelihood of getting evicted by the end of this coming week, based on the dynamic of the last week leading up to tonight. I'd say probably Whitney, but I don't know. Who would you want to see go?
I think we have a couple of people in the chat saying Alyssa, and I agree with them. I think that I would have liked to have seen Alyssa go next. I think that for multiple reasons. Number one, I don't ever want to hear Derek F say the words, "We need a girl to go home next," ever again. So we would get him to shut up about that. So there would be that. No, but seriously, I think what it does is it does break up an obvious duo in the house. And I think that Christian is going to be a really interesting HOH. And I'm interested to see, I think that now we know that like probably Hannah is in trouble right now. Potentially Derek X.
I think
Whitney.
Hannah's in a lot of trouble.
Yeah. So I think that there's a lot of interesting factors that are going to go into this, but Alyssa just hasn't given me anything really that I feel like I'm like, ooh, I like that. Like, I just kind of feel like she's just kind of there as a number for whoever just happens to have her in the moment. And I, in a perfect world, would like to see her go next. And then I would I think to round out the pre-jury, Whitney, and then either Christian or Derek F for me, I think would be an interesting pre-jury.
Yeah, and I think that like the structure of this HOH competition tonight, like really, was production saying like we want like Whitney or Hannah to win. Like any one of like the three on any team can win HOH as long as they're the one like putting in like the final piece of the puzzle. So it's like up to the team and like who they want to be HOH ultimately. So like we've seen Derek X can like compete in these competitions, win. So like I think that they were thinking like, all right, he can like do like most of the work and then like have like Hannah or Whitney win HOH, which I think would have like really opened up this season in a really great way. But I feel like we're kind of in for a snoozer week with Christian winning this HOH, unfortunately.
I think it would be awesome if Hannah wins veto. Like, what happens if Hannah wins veto, or if veto gets used on her?
I think most interestingly is if we get some combination. I think most likely, based on Christian winning, we're going to probably see like a Whitney Hannah nomination tomorrow.
Definitely.
However, because of the wildcard competition, Whitney is playing in it. She will be playing against Claire and one of either Derek F or Azah. And I think that is potentially she could win depending on the
odds
competition.
for Whitney there. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if Claire's even going to want to win it. Maybe she will. Maybe she'll do it to prevent Whitney from being safe. Or maybe it's the other way around, because I know Claire has talked about wanting Whitney to stay. She realizes that Whitney isn't actually bad for her game. I think she's right about that as well. So it might be interesting then, depending on what happens, if Whitney saves herself, what happens from there? And then what if Hannah I do think Hannah's probably going to go on the block. What happens if Hannah wins the veto or then I think the two most likely players to be targeted are both safe. Yeah. Holy crap. Like that would be interesting. Yeah.
That's tough.
It would be really interesting. And I also sit back and think like, okay, I know that there's been a lot of people who have been flipping back and forth on, okay, do we like Sarah Beth now or do we not? Because she's starting to like cause issues within the Cookout Alliance, within some of the people who she's working with. People in the house have noticed that she is a threat in this game, that she's not just some, quiet, nice passive player. And so now that she's also safe from the other people, it's going to be really interesting to see, okay, who ultimately does go home. If we know that Hannah's a target, the Cookout wants to keep Hannah safe. She's got the numbers. So regardless of what Christian wants, I think whoever sits next to Hannah, as long as it's not another Cookout person, is the person that goes home this week.
I mean, does Brittany go up in that situation? Like, I feel like she would be like an easy one for like everybody to kind of get behind if like something funky happens with like the veto and like there's not a lot of options, right?
Yeah, I mean, at that point, if we're looking at like Christian possibly still being in like the Royal Flush loyalty, I think they're going to probably want to uphold that a little bit, maybe. If we see like Whitney and Hannah potentially both saving themselves, that's really going to put them between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably going to come down to two jokers being on the block between Derek, Azah, and Brittany. I don't think he's going to put up Derek X. I don't think he's going to touch the queens, which is Claire, Tiffany, and Kyland. He can't obviously put up the kings. This is, it could get really dicey, which to be fair, I'm living for. That's what I would like to see. So I'm all for chaos, and I'm all for making players, particularly the HOH, have to pick a hard decision, make a hard decision. So I don't like it when it's a steamroll or they're coasting, just sort of riding out the week like it's been sort of happening. It's still chaotic week to week this season, but it hasn't been chaotic in terms of who's getting evicted, although I've enjoyed who's getting evicted, so I'm not terribly bothered.
Well, I think that because it breaks what we're used to seeing in the beginning of a game, I'm totally fine with it. And I tweeted this out because Tiffany came up with an interesting plan about the pairing off within the Cookout to like kind of whittle things down. And I kind of tweeted, this is the first time I feel like I really wouldn't care if there's a steamroll. I know a lot of people really enjoyed BB20 because of all the different dynamics and the chaos of like how badly Faute played in comparison and with the steamroll of the other side of the house. But that to me just was such a boring season because of it. I was like not really living for it. However, if we get a steamroll from the Cookout, I think because it's so different from what we're used to seeing in terms of representation, but also in terms of like a whole bunch of game players really putting in the effort, putting in the time, making it chaotic and fun. I think it'll be fun, but this requires precision. This is not going to just be like, oh, we steamroll because we have the numbers and go. The alliance is full of people who are willing to make sacrifices and cut people who they're working with. And that is exciting. And I don't think we're going to just see a steamroll this season.
I don't think we will either. I don't think we will either.
I don't think so. And so like as you just mentioned, Beth, like there's a lot of like gamers here, so I want to kind of shift towards like Tiffany's like new strategy, right? Because like she's been very conflicted recently about like, I want to protect the Cookout, but like I don't know if it's gonna like be a thing like down like the later stretch of this game. And she was like up all night, like she couldn't sleep. But she kind of came to like the a brigade 2.0 kind of structure here. So just to kind of run through, and Purdium, like, please correct me if I'm wrong, because I've been eating, breathing, sleeping Survivor Cambodia this week for RHAP. So like, I haven't watched the feeds as much, but from what I've gathered, in the eyes of Tiffany, right? She wants either Alyssa or Whitney to go next. So like Alyssa's clearly not going this week now. But she didn't like, it doesn't matter to her really like the order of those two. But like now that Christian's HOH, like I think Tiffany is like really gonna gung ho for Whitney. But so Tiffany kind of like wants to pair like a Cookout member with somebody else. So Tiffany will have Claire, Kyland will have Sarah Beth, Xavier will have Christian, Hannah will have Derek X. And Azah and Derek F will share Brittany from the Joker's team, right? So then like once like one like once one of their people like gets eliminated after that, they kind of get absorbed into like another team. So like of course with Azah and Derek F like sharing somebody, once say like, gosh, I don't know, like say like Sarah Beth leaves or whatever, like Azah or Derek F would kind of like shift over to like pairing up with Kyland, if that makes sense. So kind of like getting the cookout like down to that end with a final four, ideally in Tiffany's mind, of Tiffany, Hannah, Kyland, and Xavier. So if Tiffany has Hannah in mind as final four, right? She's really going to be pushing to keep her safe in particular this week. So we'll see kind of like how much influence does Tiffany's plan have over Christian's HOH and Pretty, and maybe you can give like kind of some perspective on that plan.
Yeah, I was watching it play out. I think it was yesterday morning. Because the funny thing is, like 24 hours before that, or 12 hours before that, as Tiffany was going to bed and I was going to bed, she was all in with Claire to sort of death by 1,000 cuts with Kyland. She figured out, she still kind of knows that in the back of her mind, Kyland is a big threat to win. But waking up yesterday morning, she realized that she is more here for the cookout than she is for any like her and Claire going to the end or cutting down the people that she's allied with that she feels like she wants to ultimately prop up by the end of it. She doesn't want to have any regrets. She doesn't want to walk out whether she's the winner or not. So I think that ultimately she's sort of, that's her moment. She woke up yesterday and that what you just said is pretty much exactly what she's been outlining. She wants to create this very complicated, surgical, almost in precision.
She is a phlebotomist.
It's honestly, it's pretty impeccable. It's a little bit lofty, and I almost wonder, like, to what extent is it more her than anyone else? Like, she has it mapped out with the chessboard, and I live for it. I love it. Anytime she's like, let's get the chessboard, that's like, you know, like, honey, grab the whatever, we're going. And I'm like, oh my God, Tiffany, stop. Like, I'm going to be in this have not room till like 6 a.m. at East Coast time. I do kind of worry that it might be not for her individual game the best going to the end with both Kai and X. Hannah, I'm not so worried about. I think for this week in particular, though, what I'm most interested to see is most likely Hannah will have a bit of a bullseye on her target on her back, and depending on how things break out, it's possible she becomes a primary target unintentionally by everyone outside of the cookout. What does that mean for Tiffany? How good is she going to be able to persuade others in the event that Hannah doesn't win a veto or something like that to exert her influence? And maybe she can get some of her allies to help out with that and convince the rest of the house that's not a good idea. Who do they go for next? Is it another Brittany on the block as a pawn? Is it this time as she is the actual target? I do think right now Kyland and Tiffany are the top two. And so Tiffany creating this master plan of basically engineering the whole boot order of this season. It usually isn't something that I would put a lot of stock into by week 3. But with her, and given that I think she's probably the best player in this season, honestly, like, it could happen.
Yeah,
that could happen. And if that's the case, like, she is entering into legendary status right now. It's early, but like, this is the beginning of what could be like one of the greatest players we've ever seen.
Of course,
that's a tall order to make right now.
I will say this though too, I think there's a couple aspects of her plan that we really haven't covered too much of, which is that when people are paired up, the idea would be to put the cookout member and that person on the block, since they would have the votes to save the cookout member each week. So thereby covering the tracks, quote unquote, of this cookout alliance. And I think that that's a really interesting idea. We really haven't seen too many people be like, let's pair up. And let's put our own alliance members on the block each week in order to cover our alliance, and like in this well-organized fashion, like to your point about the boot order.
I think it's hard because with the brigade, they had only 4, and this is very much sort of taking a page out of the brigade playbook where they create a side alliance with somebody not in the core. It's harder because Tiffany's trying to do it with 6 people. And this isn't Big Brother 12. This is 10 years later, so it's a little bit dicier with the twists. And this is a very game-savvy cast. I think this isn't Kristen or Reagan or Brittany, who were pretty much in the dark, believe it or not, or Brendan. This is Claire and Derek X and Sarah Beth. These are very competent strategists who I think, even Derek X, who's learning as he goes, like, it's going to be playing with fire. which makes it more impressive if she can do it. But it's yeah.
And I also think too that the other part of this is I do not believe that this cast would not like turn on each other. So there's like, oh yeah, let's put our own alliance members up on the block. You're going to tell me that someone in the cookout isn't going to take a shot at Azah, for example.
Yeah.
So you're going to tell me that someone on the block isn't going to like go for Derek F, or they're going to say Kyland's too big of a risk. Tiffany's too big of a risk based off of the pairs. I really do believe that this cast is competent enough to realize if Tiffany goes up on the block next to Claire, I think it's better to take out Tiffany because who's Claire going to even have?
Right.
Claire's not playing enough of her own game right now to branch out and really make these bonds with people in the way that, like, say, Sarah Beth might be doing. She's really basically attached to Tiffany. So you get rid of Tiffany, and now you got a number if you're somebody else in the cookout that you can try to scoop up yourself, and you got the mastermind out of the house.
Yeah, I think that's I think that's the problem with Claire is like she doesn't really have like a solid like number one besides Tiffany, who is just like outplaying the shit out of her so far. Yeah. And she's like finally like breaking through a little bit to Tiffany because like Claire is identifying like how set up and how good of a position Kyland is in. Claire just needs like somebody that's like really in her pocket, and Tiffany just kind of views Claire as like an expendable like ally to have, like a loyal soldier type of thing.
Claire has remarked on this too, to the cameras, to the feedsters, on her own in the Have Not room. She was doing it actually last night, and she was kind of like recognizing, she's like, Tiffany and I are playing two separate games. We are very much aligned. But she's acknowledging, she's like, I'm not in the best position. She's like, I'm not playing the game that I want to be playing. And I think she's like, Tiffany is playing more of a game that I wish I was playing. And so she's acknowledging, she's very self-aware. And I think she's even more she's very situationally aware. And she's like, what do I need to do? She was saying this to herself, like, what do I need to do to get myself into a position where I think I should be more comfortable? She's like, I want to be more in the center. And she's like, I kind of feel like I'm more on the outside of a big alliance, which to an extent is the truth. She's on the outside of the cookout. She's an extension of the cookout as a parachute for one of them. So yeah, these players are, in the case of Claire and Derek X and Sarah Beth, they're very capable of, and I think this week will honestly put more pressure on it than we've seen the past 3 weeks. And now, like, to your point, Beth, like, if you have Azah on the block next to, say, Brittany, like, I don't know how much Azah is going to be able to keep her composure to play her part as she should have the votes. Hypothetically, she for sure should have like the 5 votes or the 4 votes, depending on who's HOH. Or Derek F. We haven't really seen him under a ton of pressure yet this season, even though he's been losing some of his allies. So I do wonder, like, down the line, is it going to pan out? I think these next few weeks are going to be these are going to be the trials and tribulations for the Cookout Alliance.
Oh, totally.
If they can secure the votes and set up the house for the jury, post-jury, the middle of the game, to where they've kind of got like bigger targets on their parachutes than themselves, maybe that'll be...
If they can all get in one room and meet and actually be on the same page for once,
thing.
That would be great. Because like, this is like, it's amazing that we have an alliance that is so committed to each other on paper. But just has never really come together. And I think that's really fascinating to watch.
Well, that's Azah's, like, that's her fault. Like, she's the one that kind of set the precedent of, like, we can't, like, be seen in the same room together. Like, and at that point, it just becomes, like, a giant game of telephone, which is not good at all. Especially when, like, Azah and Derek F are, like, so emotionally driven players who really isolate themselves in that back room together. So they're not really doing any, like, socially, like, integrating and stuff. And I gotta say, like, I am so disappointed in Azah so far as, like, a player. I feel like everybody was like really high on her like preseason, and I feel like we thought that she would be playing like Tiffany's type of game, and we thought that Tiffany would be playing like Azah's type of game. So it's funny to see it's kind of like flipped, which is impressive on Tiffany's part, especially being the oldest house guest. But like Azah's just like volunteering to go up on the block last week is just such a big letdown to me.
Yeah, there's some interesting chat going on between Heather and Joseph in the chat right now about Brittany and the sense of entitlement, and I kind of want to talk about this a little bit because I am a Brittany sympathizer. I'm not sitting back thinking that she's necessarily like the best player in the world, nor do I think that. But I don't think that she deserves the hate that she's getting. A lot of it, I can't help but always have in the back of my mind that. Yeah, I do think that she should be disclosing to people what her neurodivergency is, but at the same time, that is her choice to make. It's not, we discussed this a couple of weeks ago on the podcast, Palladium, where we were talking about how there were some of your social identities that are on display for everyone to see. Like people know what your skin color is. Mm-hmm. But there are some things like even your gender or your sexuality, neurodivergencies, or abilities and such. Those are not always something that people can see and catch on to immediately. And there's a lot of prejudice that can come along with that. And that can, unfortunately, as we've seen many times in these kind of games, rear its ugly head and ruin your game with it. And so people, especially those that have a harder time socializing, because of a neurodivergency, in her case, she's autistic, you have somebody who we know some information that the rest of the house probably doesn't know, because I don't think that she's disclosed this to anybody else.
Yeah,
and on the one hand,
talked about. I've never heard that about.
And on the one hand, we sit back and we want to say, well, that's fantastic. We want to treat her like anybody else who's in the house, give her the same kind of criticisms. But on the other hand, just like we would say, in the past where there was only one or two people per race in the whole house representing their entirety of their race on top of trying to navigate a social game, like how much pressure that comes with it and how it can impact your ability to socialize with people in the house and break into alliances and such. We have to think the same way for Brittany in this situation too. And so I do think that both, and I'm not saying that that Heather, I want to make clear that I don't say that you're hating on her. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that there were people on Twitter who were hating on her. So what I'm saying is that I think it's an important thing to consider, because we call out and say like, oh, Brittany's so entitled, she's throwing a fit about this and blah, 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 blah. But Azah's throwing a fit. Derek F is throwing a fit. And people are talking about them in a different way as well. And we have to keep their race in mind. We have to keep Azah's gender and race in mind, and those different kinds of things. So I think what this cast is really important in showing, and I will come off my soapbox here in a second, is the ability to think about people's intersectionalities of their identities and how that influences how they perceive information and how they play the game with other people. And also how we react to it as audience members.
Yeah. And so Kyland says it pretty well. Like, I'm looking at it from like a game perspective here, because she's the one that has been nominated these bunches of times. So like she is the one that is dealing with it at the forefront of her game the most. And I feel like the whole Jokers team has like the Frenchie curse on them, which like really put them in a bad position starting out, right? And Kyland says, I understand her lack of social cues and stuff, but that doesn't mean she can demand 3 weeks of safety.
100%.
So that's what I agree with here is like, so like Brittany, like she's frustrated that she's like a pawn, right? She's like getting nominated once again, right? But she does like, she gets upset and she says like, why me? But she doesn't take it a step further and kind of like zoom out and think about it from like Xavier's point of view of like, all right, well, she's already been nominated. So Brent is like such like a clear target. Like, why do I want to make somebody else upset when they've already been put up on the block? Like for Brittany so far, it's ended at why me. And that is the issue with Brittany. But
the other part of that is besides Azah, who's also having similar issues within the house, she doesn't have anybody to really put this into perspective for her and work with her on this. So it's really hard. She's not like someone who is connected as Tiffany or Kyland or Sarah Beth, or somebody who has a multitude of people who can come to them and say, no, you're thinking of this from a different perspective than everybody else. Here's some information for you to clarify. And because she's emotional about it, and who wouldn't be? You're on the block a couple weeks in a row and your team is the one that's being targeted. Like, there's aspects of that are probably coming at her as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say, unfortunately for Brittany, she's kind of falling on the outskirts of two dominant alliances that have a lot of overlap.
Yeah.
And in this week, particular week 3, we saw Brittany, Whitney, and Brent were the 3 players who just didn't have that blanket of security of being in the know, and that allows you to really take a load off when you know that there are 7 other people backing you or 5 other
100%.
people. In the case of her, she didn't have that. And I think that leads a lot to explaining her reaction, even if you think, yes, she's a pawn and yeah, she's against Brent, who is visibly the house target to everyone but Brent. And I also think to some extent, there's a decent amount of like, I actually like Brittany having this reaction in a sense, because from a gameplay perspective, it is discouraging her from becoming a pawn in the future. People don't want to nominate her, and it's like a lot of the times you see on a season a player goes up on the block repeatedly because they become the easy person to put up there because they kind of get used to it, and people get used to them being up there.
That's a really good point. Like, she's not a Victoria by any
You don't want to get
It's
comfortable.
not Johnny Mac who's just like, I'm gonna make a joke about this. You know what I mean? Like, it's just
eventually it catches up to you down the line, and I mean, unfortunately for Brittany, it's beyond that because there are 2 mega alliances that are sort of overlapping. So she is still technically on the outs, and another one of those players has won the HOH this week, so she's still a name to be put up as a potentially as a pawn. But I do think that fighting your way out of being a pawn status or showing a very much a strong, like, you do not agree with it and you really don't like it, even if we don't like her logic or somebody else doesn't like her logic, I still think showing that is like, it's not encouraging people in the future to do it, because it's not going to be an easy pawn situation.
Right.
They're trying to find like an easy person to put up next to Brent, next to Whitney, next to Frenchie. And they're not finding that. And I think that that's actually, it's not something I see very often. Usually you will see the pawn repeatedly be like, all right, I don't love it, but I'll go with it. She's like, no, I don't love it and I don't want to go with it, and don't do it again. I will like smite you, like never do that. So even though she's not thinking, maybe she's not, I was always thinking like, what is happening from X's point of view? I still don't think that it's like the worst case scenario for her. So
I mean,
and
like,
she did survive 11-0, so good for her.
And so maybe this is like somebody that Claire should pick up, right? Because it's like somebody that can, like, she can easily like bring along to the end. And she's looking for a number 1. I feel like Brittany, all you have to do is like give her like a lot of love and validation. Just let her in a little bit on the info, but not too much.
Claire did pinky swear with her today in the storage room to protect each other for the long term of the season if they can. Claire has been trying to find somebody that she can work with secretly, and maybe that's Brittany in this case, but they did
and
talk
Brittany
today
has
about
proven that she's loyal. So I mean, she would be loyal to her team. She's going to be loyal to the people that she feels like has her back. So if Claire is willing to put in the time and the effort to make her feel like she is supported, then I think that could be a good ally. But like Caitlin and Heather are both in the chat saying this, and I completely agree. If I'm anybody in the cookout, I want to get Brittany out before jury, because I don't think that she would be a jury member that you can count on. You won't know where her head's at. You want to stack the jury with people who you have a good understanding of where their votes are going to go.
Yeah, that is very true. But I just like looking at the board, right? Like I'm like scratching my head trying to figure out like, who is Claire's person, if not Brittany? It's just a very tough position for her. But like I'm sorry to like keep harping on Claire. Like, of course there's like other house guests, but like I just I feel like she's she's like out of the cookout. I feel like she and I feel like she has a really good understanding of the game, and so I like these thoughts that we are having and talking about, like, who is Claire's person. It's great to see that like she is thinking about that as well and trying to carve that path for
she's
her.
thinking about it. She's acting on it at the moment. We'll see where it goes from here.
We'll see.
She could be a good ally for Brittany this week, depending on how the noms and the veto and the wild card break out. It's possible Brittany could find herself on the block. I don't think it's going to be. It's possible they like tried to convince Whitney that she's actually really safe and maybe shouldn't win the wild card. I could see that happening. Yeah. Because this is another thing that Kai has been pitching a lot. Kyland has been saying he and X both don't want Whitney in the jury because she has said that she would only vote for a woman if she was on the jury, and that to them is their excuse to target her. That's basically what they're saying. I don't know for sure if they 100 like. Whitney does have a decent relationship with Xavier, so maybe that's not the worst case. I imagine I could see her voting for him if he was in the final two, even though he's not a woman. But nonetheless, it's interesting how this is. They're honestly, I don't think I've seen a cast focus so much on pre-jury boots in the order and like considering it for like jury management in a way, like they're managing who should be on the jury and why, and it's really interesting to see play out.
Sam asks, why is nobody targeting Derek X?
He's just that good.
Yeah.
He's got a very good social. I think for one reason is he's got a very good social game with a lot of people.
Yeah.
He's very, he's very like affable, and he doesn't take a lot of things very seriously. I think him being such a house pariah in week one, and largely thanks to Frenchie, who's now gone, who isn't building him up as this big whatever decoy that needs to go. And also he's proven to be a valuable asset, winning 2 vetoes back to back. You don't always think that that's a good idea, but I think for his case, it's shown that he is somebody that they can rely on to win a competition for your team if you need him.
Sure.
And then of course he's got a connection with Hannah, who's in mostly the dominant alliance, and so that's what I'm seeing. He's just
This is somebody who is a big fan of Survivor, who understands social strategy games, just hasn't been familiar with Big Brother. So what I like about his gameplay, whether this is intentional or not, is that he's allowed other people to take on the role of mentor, of like, I'm going to teach you this game, because that creates a relationship where they feel like they're going to, first of all, underestimate your abilities. And that's always good. And secondly, it's going to give them a sense of like protection of, okay, we taught him, so now we're going to use him for numbers. He's actually in a really interesting position that he shouldn't do anything, I would say, in the next couple of weeks, but kind of lay low, continue what he's doing. But I could see him easily saying, okay, I don't like the pairs idea. Let's flip on the cookout. If we were to do Tiffany's plan, I could see him being the one to lead that flip. And taking someone like Hannah along with it to make the flip happen would be beautiful. I think it could happen. It would be chaotic. Please give it to me.
I have a theory. What if maybe Claire's move is to kind of push for Hannah to go this week, right? Which Christian and Alyssa would totally be down for. Like Alyssa, like really has her eyes set on Hannah. That frees up Derek X for Claire to kind of scoop up like as her person, and that's a pretty good person to have as your like number one ally.
Yeah, I think that
they're close. I could see it.
Yeah, Hans in the chat also made a really good point that if Claire and Sarah Beth ever got together, that would be like a really interesting duo. But because Sarah Beth is with Kyland, that's not gonna happen. Yeah. But again, if you can get out either Tiffany or Kyland, I think that what ends up happening is that other person, whether it's Tiffany or Kyland, joins the two of them and they create like a dynamic trio. Yeah. So I would love to see that happen. And I think for those four, if those four came together and said, we are the final four, forget everybody else, we're the final four, whoo-hoo, that's dangerous for the rest of the house for sure.
Totally. I do kind of feel like in order for the cookout to consider taking on anyone outside of the cookout, the cookout will need to eventually, like, I don't know how to say it, but like they're gonna have to have like a crack in the dam, and they're gonna need to start to realize that it's like they can't have this perfect flawless final 6 boot order, which would then be able to like, okay, we need to entertain a little bit more self-interest while also still maintaining that the agreement we came upon in the beginning of the game. So I think it's gonna be very hard to get Tiffany and Kyland out, but I do like the idea of it, like it would bring together some very strong players. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think Tiffany and Kyland are probably the 2 strongest right now, so that's why I'm like, that's going to be hard to getting out a Kyland or a Tiffany to cement.
Imagine a double eviction night where whoever wins HOH say that it's like, I don't know, Azah. And Azah has an epiphany and she goes, I need to put Tiffany and Kyland on the block. And she puts them on next to each other and neither of them come down. Woo-hoo!
Good luck manifesting that.
Well, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just like, I don't think it would be her. But
how great would that be?
But how great? Like, you sit back and you're like, first of all, the drama. First of all, if that episode in particular is not nominated for every Emmy, it's not even happening. And I'm like, already thinking about award season for it. No, this,
I mean,
that kind of thing would be incredible.
The episode that Tiffany and Kyland both hit the block at the same time will be cataclysmic for this season.
Yeah.
And speaking to like that kind of like pecking order within the cookout per diem, I think that's where like the roots of like the teams really comes into play, where I feel like Azah and Derek F are like easily number 6 and 5.
Yeah.
In that big alliance structure. And that feels like pretty like naturally fluid. Like I don't think that I mean, like Tiffany said that her final 4 doesn't include them, but like I didn't need her to say that for me to kind of understand that like that's kind of where I think this is going.
Yeah, definitely.
And I don't know, just like when I was watching Kyland tonight, like voting to evict, I was like, man, I he was my winner preseason per diem, and I still feel like Kyland is the winner of the season. I feel very strongly about that, and I don't know if it's because like he reminds me kind of like Tyshawn in terms of like his like play style from like Big Brother Canada 9. But I'm just like I feel really good about Kyland's position in the game, and like Claire's like taking some like dings at that right now, but like I think that that's like not something to be like too worried about.
I thought your winner pick was Claire.
No, it was Kyland.
When you were doing the draft?
No, just so like after, like when I picked Kyland.
I'm just saying, I'm trying to call out that you're changing your story here, Tyler.
When we did the draft, Claire wasn't
I know, that's why I was saying, was it Kyland then, and then you saw Claire get drafted, and you're I don't know.
No, I'm still riding pretty high on Kyland.
I honestly like, so I didn't put him. I have like this top 4 that I try to do every season after I watch a week of. I watch a week of the live feeds, and then I sit down and assess based on that instead of preseason, because if I did it based on the preseason, I would probably be pretty off my mark. Unfortunately, I know Oz is close. I was really high on her in the preseason, and not in my top 4, but it's okay. But yes, Kyland is, in my opinion, sitting in the best spot in the house, even going into this week. Tiffany's right behind him, though, and it will come down to, I think, I would prefer Tiffany to find a way to get Kyland out at some point down the line. I just fear that he will probably have a better relationship with almost everyone in the cookout, and by the time that it gets to that point, I worry that Tiffany might run out of runway to launch something against him when he's got such a good social game. It would have to come down to like convincing people Kyland is the shoe-in winner, as you're saying, Tyler. He does feel like a really good winner. I've been talking with Brian Scally. Scally shows up every time I'm talking, and he's just like, he's all about Kyland. So anytime I say something nice, he pops up in my chat. Honestly, I'd be totally cool with him winning. I think he'd be a great winner. He's playing arguably the best game right now, so I'm down for that.
And I do think it'll be interesting though too, because we did see Tiffany kind of talking to herself in the bathroom and talking to us and such, that she knows Kyland is a threat, and so she keeps going back and forth of this. Do I work with him? Do I get him out? Do I do both? What do I do? And I feel like over the past day, it's turned into I need to work with him rather than I'm going to get him out. But I hope she does continue to have this, I need to get him out sooner than later, but let's wait till jury situation. I think that that's actually, if you can get him out in like an early double eviction, if there is one, an early jury, I think that's the best time to get him out.
Yeah. I think she's going to need to find a way to orchestrate it not from her own doing.
Of course,
which would be very detrimental to her jury management if she gets to the final 2. So
totally.
And then like so pretty like your like top 4 people like after like week like 2 or whatever that you make like every season, they tend to make the end and or win, correct? Like that I feel like it's more the exception than the rule that they don't get there.
It is. I started doing this with Big Brother 14, and only because of my YouTube channel, I posted on week 2, so it gives me, and Amon has been involved as well for the last 3 seasons, so it gives us both a little bit more extra padding than it normally would, but I started it after, I would make my declaration usually after 1 week, and I would post in another Big Brother Superfan community back in the day with 10 years ago now in 2012, and I would talk about my explanations why. And up until Josh on BB19, I got it right. Yeah. Josh was the first person to just did not see that coming, which to be fair, Josh's week 1 was a lot to deal with on BB19. That whole week 1 was a lot to deal with. Yes. So they usually
The
tend
whole
to do pretty
season
well.
was a lot to deal with.
The whole season was a lot to deal with. Yeah, so I tend to do pretty well, and I don't know. I managed to mostly like I predicted to Sean. The one time I truly botched it was BB Can 7. I just severely I'm like, we're not going to get the brigade again. Like, come on, guys, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, that whole season
then
was
we
a
did.
sausage
So.
fest.
Yeah, I really underestimated how good they would end up being. So that was that was the one time I've done really bad. I always look back on that, say I can be humbled. Just because I get it right doesn't mean that I can't get it wrong.
Sure.
Yeah. So, but this season I did put Tiffany, Claire, Sarah Beth, and Xavier. And I really struggled putting Kyland in my top 4. And I feel like on some level he could, but ultimately he's at the top 5. And the whole number list is arbitrary anyway. It could be a top 5. It was basically, I want to find out who are the players that are actually worth paying attention to that I think will actually go to win. And that's the one thing about BB23 that I found so interesting is that there's a lot of contenders this year.
Yeah.
Most seasons I don't get very inspired by a lot of the cast to the point where I'm willing to say that person has a good chance to win after 1 week.
Yeah.
It's usually pretty obvious if you've watched a lot of Big Brother and you pay attention to it to the degree that a lot of us do. But this season, very difficult. I don't know. I don't even feel confident saying Tiffany's going to win or Claire's going to win or Xavier's going to win because it could be Kyland.
What made you go with Xavier over Kyland, just out of curiosity?
Honestly, I felt like Kyland was me too big of a threat down the line. And that's a risky pick to make, but oftentimes I saw a lot of people sort of picking up on how good Kyland is, and they've been picking up on it now for the past 3 weeks. He has a very good social game. He's very well positioned. And with this cast being full of gamers, and at the time, to be fair, like Tiffany hadn't fully cemented. She was the mover and the shaker. She's sort of deciding the direction, and her deciding to work with the cookout, I think, has very much boosted his chances to win now. But at the time, I was like, I feel like there's so many self-interested players on this season. They're going to notice that as good as Kyland is, I think he's going to become too good for his own benefit to win the season. Xavier kind of is good, but he's not top of the line. Like he has to go first.
I don't think people are looking at X the way that they're looking at Kyland, which is I think people are actually starting to take notice that, oh, Kyland is in a good position. We like Kyland, blah, blah, blah. X is in a good position, but there's like a little bit of risk with him, which is actually healthy, I think, this game. You don't want to be in a perfectly comfortable position like Kyland is in week after week, because all of a sudden that makes you the number 1 target randomly 1 week and you can't climb out of it. You want to be kind of always a little bit on your tippy toes. And because X has a good protection, but people have, okay, he won HOH, he's clearly physical, he's got a good social game. Like he will always be a person that people think about, but they're not like 100% concerned with him in the way that they would be about Kyland. So in that way, I actually agree with your power ranking in that I would put X there versus Kyland for that reason.
I could see them both going really far. I just was like, I wonder if when it gets push comes to shove, you get to the very end, some of these players are too self-interested to think like I should take Kyland to the final 2. Yeah, it's possible we get that happening. And I wouldn't be surprised if Kyland wins this season. I would be like, that's great. He's playing, I think, probably the best game right now. Yeah. So man, we'll see.
All right.
So shall we take a look at our drafts?
I was just about to bring
I
that
want to
up.
see what Peridium's thoughts are on our draft.
I want to know whose draft team you think is best here. So Allison has lost her
definitely
third.
Allison.
Allison
she lost her third, and she drafted Christine, which ended up being Claire. So.
Oh no! I hope she's not a prophet. That's rough.
What are you thinking, Peridium?
Okay, well, obviously Allison is out on that.
Yeah.
Based on that, I like seeing Tiff. She is surrounded by players who I wouldn't pick. It's probably going to come down to aggregate based on that. I'd say Tyler's is looking not bad with you got DX, Sarah Beth, and Kyland. So yeah, I'm looking at you the most. I like Xavier. I like Tiff. I think Tyler, you're sitting the prettiest.
I do think that Tyler is sitting the prettiest for sure. I think the only weaker link on his team is Alyssa. And I think that it's going to be interesting for me this week having Christian as HOH because I know that he'll be safe, but it could mean that Derek F or Azah in a desperate situation could be seeing the block.
Yeah.
So interesting all the way around. I think I would definitely say Tyler. I think you have the strongest team. I actually am struggling between who has the second strongest between Andrew and me. I think I think I slightly edge out Andrew, but it's very 50. I think it's like 49-51. Seriously, like only because we know that Tiffany and Hannah have been popular names for this week. I feel like his team is more likely to be targeted. My team would be more likely to be the backup targets for the week.
And Christian is I think we haven't talked about enough of like Christian's like competition prowess in this game, which is definitely like could be like a huge hinder to like the cookouts plans and like Tiffany's plans and stuff like that. So he's certainly one to like keep an eye on, especially like he just won this comp tonight. But with that being said, there is an endurance competition next week for HOH, so he will not be able to compete in that, and the teams are over. So let's just say for shits and giggles, it's the wall comp. Who do you guys think are good contenders to win that?
It's probably not going to be a guy if I had to place a bet. Usually, I think a smaller player tends to win.
I was just going to say, I don't think that Claire would do too well. She's pretty tall. I think that the taller players tend to have a little bit more trouble with it.
Maybe Hannah, is she physical? Maybe.
I was thinking Hannah or Alyssa.
I
could see Alyssa.
Yeah, I think Alyssa is probably my choice for that. But we'll see. You know what? I'm gonna change that. I'm gonna really come out of left field for this. I think it's gonna be Brittany.
Oh shit!
I was thinking Brittany. I think she might have the desire to stay up there.
Yeah, that's true.
And because of her martial arts training, I think she knows how to center herself in a physical. We haven't seen it yet. We haven't seen that centering of the self yet, but
it's
a physical competition. I could see her knowing how to, readjust, center, focus pain elsewhere, do that kind of thing. So I'm interested to see if that skill set comes in. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say Brittany.
Yeah.
There we go.
I will be curious if Alyssa's mentality, knowing she's probably, she is 100% safe this week. If she goes into the endurance comp deciding, do we want to lower our threat level or is it too late? Because she and Christian were talking about that going into this HOH. Yeah. Do they want to win it? Should they win it? Is it a good idea? Christian's already probably known as the biggest comp beast this season. I think everyone outside of him has acknowledged that he is. It's how much does he realize that? I think they have a decent understanding that they are probably going to become a power couple that are going to be targeted.
Yeah.
I don't think they can. Obviously, they're not going to win every HOH and veto down the line. So it's like, does Alyssa want to win that back-to-back, cementing their status?
Yeah.
I don't know. I could see her winning it, but will she have the drive to?
I don't know. I think it'll be interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. So if you're watching this on YouTube, leave us a comment who you think will win this.
Which we found out this is the only platform that we are currently streaming on.
Yes, that is my fault. My apologies on that.
No worries.
When Allison is not here, something's always bound to mess up, and it's 100%.
Well, actually, when Allison is here, that is also when things are bound to mess up.
Welcome to my weekly meltdown.
We're a mess. It's okay.
It's a meltdown. It's whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go.
Weekly.
Any last thoughts before we wrap up here?
I'm excited to watch the feeds tonight as usual.
Yeah.
It's been 3 weeks. I honestly can't remember the last time I've enjoyed watching the feeds daily for so long. Mm-hmm. And I've enjoyed the episodes for the most part. I thought this was one of my favorites tonight, so I'm looking forward to it. I can't predict exactly what's going to happen with this season yet, which is great. Usually we have a good idea. Last season for sure was like Enzo winning HOH this week. Big moves didn't happen. No chance, Yeah. So for me, I'm don't want to take this for granted, and I'm going to appreciate what we have while we have it. So
I like BBK9 really rejuvenated what I think the future of Big Brother could and should be. And I'm glad that somebody at CBS was watching that season, I think, and noticing just the difference of quality of these fans and these complex humans rather than just influencers and models. And it's so refreshing, right?
I'll tell you who didn't watch it, and that would be Allison Grodner.
Yes.
Yeah, probably Rich Mien too.
Yeah. Oh, seriously. And Peridium, where can people find you, and what are you up to that people can tune into to catch you?
Yeah, I'm every week on Thursdays for Big Brother and Wednesdays for Survivor when it's on the air back down in September. I post videos, usually 15 minutes, youtube.com/Peridium, Peridiam. I'm on Twitter, Billy Geist, that's my real name. And that's it. That's mostly where you'll find me. I have a Discord.
Very
You can
cool.
find all my social links are on the description of every video. So
Yes. And are you playing Among Us this weekend?
I will be. Yeah, are you?
I will not be, unfortunately.
Okay.
I'm hoping to return to the game soon and cause my chaos, but I am I'm celebrating my sister's birthday this weekend,
cool.
so I won't be
Happy
able to
birthday
do
to
that.
her.
Yeah, so excellent. So be sure to follow him on Twitch so you can catch all the fun Among Us actions on Sundays where he also participates. It's a lot of fun, and he's a great perspective to watch for that too.
And just on like behalf of like the Big Brother community, Peridium, like thank you so much for just putting out like A+ quality content for us. Like it really gets us through the off season and really gets our minds thinking about like different things in the game and stuff like that. So bravo to you, and just like the like storyboarding and execution, like all of it is just like top notch. So
absolutely.
Yeah. It almost didn't happen years ago. I had an idea for it for this channel, and then I ultimately didn't do it. I started a completely different channel, and I didn't enjoy it. So I went back to the drawing board, and 4 years later, here we are. So
well, I'm glad you hated that other channel.
Yeah, I'm glad too, to be honest. I'm so glad I didn't do it. But yeah.
Absolutely. No, well, we've all really benefited from the content that you put out there. And we're so thankful that you were able to join us tonight. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat some Big Brother with us. Yes. If you would like to continue to watch My Weekly Meltdown, we will be live back again on Sunday.
Yes. After Sunday night's episode.
After Sunday night's episode. Typically our Sundays are less strategy and more like, what the hell is happening in this house? It's a little bit more casual. Tyler and I like to talk a little bit more strategy on Thursdays. Allison likes to lead the show on Sundays. And for those that don't know Allison, she is a hoot and a half. She's the channel creator, and she is a blast to listen to. So if you're coming here for the first time, please feel free to check us out on Sunday when we go live on YouTube. And we'll go from there.
Yep. So I'm gonna play the outro. Peridium, just hang out backstage with us so we can chat a little bit before we hang up. But all right, everybody, have a great rest of your night. Take care, and we'll see you guys on Sunday. Bye.